Our seventh wedding anniversary fell on a Thursday in mid-March 2025. Portland was still shaking off winter, gray skies, that damp chill that seeps into your bones. But I wanted the night to feel like spring. I chose Le Jardin again, the same French bistro on the Willamette where we'd had our first proper date back in college. Back then it was cheap pasta and house wine. Now it was $48 entrees and a wine list thick as a novel. I booked the corner table weeks ahead. The one with the tall windows that let you watch the river lights dance on the water like floating lanterns. I called the chef personally to request a custom chocolate soufflé with "Forever Starts Tonight" written in raspberry coulis across the plate. I even asked the sommelier to decant her favorite 2018 Bordeaux early so it could breathe. I did all of it because I still believed in gestures. Not grand, movie-style ones, just the quiet, consistent proof that someone is seen, valued, chosen every day. Elena had been distant for months. Shorter replies, longer work hours, that polite smile she used when she was mentally elsewhere. I told myself it was stress. Her marketing agency had just landed a big client. Deadlines were brutal. I thought if I reminded her of the beginning, of us before the mortgage and the routines, she'd remember why we fit. We arrived at 7:30. She looked beautiful in the emerald dress I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years earlier, the one she said made her feel like she could conquer rooms. We ordered duck confit for her, steak frites for me. Conversation started light, work updates, a funny story about her new intern, plans for a summer trip we kept postponing. Halfway through the main course, as the candle between us flickered low, she set her fork down with careful precision, met my eyes, and said the words that would echo for the rest of my life. "You'll never be half the man Ethan was." He actually knew how to make me feel alive, not just maintained. The restaurant sounds, clinking glasses, low laughter, soft jazz, dropped away. Ethan. The name hadn't crossed her lips in 6 years. In the early days she'd called him, that chaotic phase I outgrew before I met someone real. Someone real. That used to be me. Now I was the man who maintained her. Heat flooded my face, but I kept my expression blank. No raised voice. No demand for explanation. I just nodded once, slow, mechanical, took a sip of wine that tasted like metal shavings, and lifted my hand for the check. She let out a sharp breath through her nose, the sound she made when I disappointed her by not fighting back. She grabbed her coat, muttered, "I need some air," and walked out. No backward glance. No, I'm sorry. Just the rhythmic click of her heels fading into the wet night. I sat there alone for another 25 minutes, staring at the dying candle and two cooling plates. The waiter hovered once, asked if everything was all right. I forced a thin smile and said yes. I paid the bill in full, left a 30% tip because old habits die hard, and asked for her untouched duck to be boxed. Some pathetic part of me still hoped she'd come home later, open the fridge, see the container, and remember I wasn't the enemy. The drive back to our condo in the Pearl District was silent. No radio, no podcast. Streetlights smeared across the windshield like tears I refused to shed. I parked in the underground garage, rode the elevator up, unlocked the door to the dark apartment that suddenly felt too big. I kicked off my shoes, poured 3 fingers of the good scotch I kept for bad days, and sat on the couch in the dark. The city hummed outside the windows, indifferent. For 7 years, I treated marriage like architecture. Lay good foundations, shared values, steady affection. Reinforce with daily maintenance, dates, listening, support, and trust the structure would hold against time. I expected effort to compound into security, that nostalgia for an ex would fade under the weight of lived history. Reality arrived as one sentence. Ethan wasn't archived. He was canon, the unreachable ideal I'd been failing to match since day one. My silence at the table wasn't strength. It was avoidance, a final attempt to preserve the illusion while the beams groaned overhead. Around 11:45 p.m., I finally looked at my phone. The screen glowed with horror, 312 unread notifications. Texts, missed calls, voicemails stacking like incoming artillery. Not just Elena. Her best friend Lauren had sent 23 messages in under an hour. My brother-in-law texted, "Dude, WTF is going on?" Even a few from her agency Slack that somehow routed to iMessage. Unknown numbers peppered the list. I opened voicemail first. Elena's voice, thin and shaky. Lucas, please pick up. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I was frustrated. Work, everything. Just call me back. The next 10 were variations. Apologies bleeding into blame. You always shut down. You never fight for us. Then back to pleading. Lauren's messages escalated. She's crying in my passenger seat right now. She says you stormed out. She's a wreck. Please call her. At 2:47 a.m., a text from an blocked number cut through the noise. Mr. Harper, this is Detective Ramirez, Portland Police Bureau, Financial Crimes Unit. We need to speak with you urgently regarding your wife, Elena Vasquez. It concerns suspected identity theft, unauthorized access to financial accounts, and possible wire fraud. Return this call immediately. My pulse slammed against my ribs. Identity theft? I dialed. Detective Ramirez answered on the second ring, voice calm and procedural. He explained that Elena had accessed multiple dormant freelance accounts tied to my name, consulting gigs I'd done before we married, untouched for years. Using credentials saved on our home Wi-Fi, she'd initiated transfers totaling $47,200 to an offshore crypto wallet. Fraud detection algorithms flagged the pattern. IP logs traced activity to our condo IP earlier that evening and, after she left the restaurant, to a boutique hotel on the east side registered under her maiden name. She was at the precinct now. Her story: the accounts were marital property. I'd given verbal permission during a recent conversation about joint finances. She'd even named the exact night, 2 weeks earlier, over takeout, when I supposedly agreed. I remembered that night. We'd argued about her late hours. I'd said, whatever, Elena, to end the fight. She'd taken silence for consent. I sat frozen on the couch, scotch glass sweating in my hand. The apartment felt colder, smaller. Every small withdrawal she'd made over the past 2 years, $300 here, $800 there, suddenly looked deliberate. She'd called them miscellaneous expenses when I noticed odd charges. I'd trusted her. Why wouldn't I? The dinner humiliation triggered fear of abandonment. In panic, she accelerated a long-brewing plan, raiding my dormant accounts to secure escape capital. One emotional grenade detonated a criminal chain. Flag transfers police involvement my awakening. My delay in checking the phone bought her hours, but answering the detective lit the fuse on irreversible consequences. The intercom buzzed at exactly 5:32 a.m., a sharp, insistent sound that cut through the pre-dawn quiet of the condo like a knife. I hadn't slept, not really. I'd spent the hours since the detective's call alternating between staring at the ceiling and pacing the living room in socked feet, replaying every small moment from the past 2 years that suddenly looked different. The way she'd hug her phone to her chest when a notification came in, the client dinners that stretched until 2 a.m., the vague explanations about needing space to think. Through the peephole, the hallway light cast long shadows. There she was, Elena, mascara streaked down both cheeks in dark rivers, hair damp and clinging to her neck from the March rain, wearing the same emerald dress from dinner, but now wrinkled and rain-spotted. Flanking her were 2 plainclothes officers, one older man with a tired mustache, the other a younger woman whose hand rested lightly on her duty belt. They looked bored, like they'd done this doorstep routine 100 times. Elena pressed the intercom again, voice thinner than I'd ever heard it. Lucas, please. Open the door. I know you're in there. I can explain everything. It's not what they're saying. It's a misunderstanding. I swear. Her words cracked on the last syllable, the same practiced tremor she used whenever she'd forgotten an anniversary or snapped at me in front of friends and needed to smooth things over. I watched her twist her wedding band around her finger, faster and faster, a nervous tick I used to find endearing. Now it looked like calculation. The older officer cleared his throat. Ma'am, if he doesn't answer, we can't force entry without a warrant. You said he was home. Elena leaned closer to the speaker. Lucas, I'm scared. They're saying things that aren't true. Just let me in so we can talk. Please. For old time's sake. I didn't move. My thumb hovered over the unlock button, muscle memory from 7 years of opening doors for her, literally and figuratively. But something had shifted in the last few hours. The detective's calm recitation of IP logs, transfer amounts, and hotel receipts had stripped away the last layer of plausible deniability. This wasn't a bad fight or a momentary lapse. This was premeditated. Instead of buzzing her in, I stepped back into the living room, picked up my phone, and redialed Detective Ramirez. He answered on the first ring. "Mr. Harper, you okay?" "She's at my door with officers," I said quietly. "Crying. Asking to talk." A pause. Then, measured. That's standard procedure when someone's detained and wants to speak to a spouse. But listen carefully. We have more now. The small withdrawals go back 26 months. $280 here, $750 there. Always under miscellaneous or office supplies. Never enough to flag individually, but the pattern is clear. And the Maui trip last July? Room service charges for 2 dinners, champagne, and a couple's massage. Timestamped the same night, she texted you the conference was killing her and she missed you. Close my eyes. I remembered that week vividly. She'd come home tanned, relaxed, full of stories about team-building exercises. I'd even joked that she looked like she'd been on vacation, not work. She'd laughed and said, "Jealous?" Ramirez continued. "We also pulled credit card statements. Multiple charges at a jeweler downtown, men's watches, expensive ones. Not in your size." My throat tightened. Do I have to let her in? No, you don't. And if you don't want contact, tell her through the door. We can advise her to leave. I walked back to the peephole. Elena was wiping her face with the sleeve of her dress now, mascara smearing worse. The younger officer was speaking softly to her, probably explaining next steps. Elena looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, vulnerable, almost fragile. Part of me, the part that still remembered her laughing in our kitchen at 2 a.m. while we made pancakes, wanted to open the door, pull her inside, fix it. But the larger part, the one that had just learned she'd been stealing from me for over 2 years while measuring me against another man, won. I pressed the intercom button. My voice came out flat, almost unrecognizable. "Elena, go home, or wherever you're staying tonight. I'm not opening the door." Silence on her end. Then a choked sob. "Lucas, please. I messed up. I know I did. But we can fix this. Therapy, whatever you want. Just don't." "Don't what?" I cut in. "Don't press charges? Don't tell the truth." The older officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, if he's declining entry, we need to escort you out." She started crying harder. Real tears now. Or at least they looked real. "Lucas, I love you." I was scared. Work was falling apart, and I panicked. "I never meant to hurt you." I leaned my forehead against the cool door. "You didn't just hurt me. You used me. For years. And tonight, you made sure I knew exactly how little I measured up." She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was small. I was angry. I said things I didn't mean. "You meant them," I said. "You've been meaning them for a long time." The line went quiet. After a long moment, footsteps retreated down the hallway. I watched through the peephole as the officers guided her toward the elevator. She glanced back once, eyes red, pleading, but I didn't move. The doors closed. The hallway emptied. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor, back against the wood, knees to my chest. For the first time since dinner, I let myself feel the full weight. Not just anger, grief. The grief of realizing the woman I'd built a life with had been living a different one beside it. Elena's behavior combines narcissistic supply-seeking with anxious, preoccupied attachment. Public devaluation reasserted dominance, while doorstep vulnerability aimed to resecure her safety net through guilt induction. The performative sobbing and appeals to old times were tactical, not remorse-driven. She still viewed me as salvageable infrastructure rather than an autonomous person. My refusal to open the door represented a pivotal internal shift. Years of codependent peacekeeping gave way to self-protective detachment. Suppressed anger and eroded self-worth finally coalesced into a firm boundary, marking the moment I stopped auditioning for her approval. 10 days later, March 25, 2026, Detective Ramirez called at 8:17 a.m. "We executed the warrant on the storage unit this morning. Unit number 214 at Pacific Secure Storage near PDX. You should come down. There are items here that belong to you, legally and personally." I drove through morning traffic in a daze, past the coffee shop where we used to meet for Saturday lattes, past the park where we'd walk the dog we adopted in year 2, before she decided pets were too much responsibility. Every landmark felt like a taunt. Ramirez met me at the gate. No handshake, just a nod. "Brace yourself," he said. The corridor smelled of concrete and old cardboard. Unit number 214's padlock was already cut. Ramirez flicked on the overhead fluorescent. 12 bankers' boxes lined the walls, labeled in Elena's precise handwriting. L. Harper Consulting 2016 to 2018. LH Tax Records 2015 to 2020. LH IP Notes and Contracts. LH Personal Docs, scanned. I knelt by the first box. Inside, my old freelance contracts, W-2s from pre-marriage years, high-resolution scans of my passport, driver's license, even my social security card. Many documents had her agency logo superimposed. Signatures at the bottom looked like mine, but the cross on the T slanted wrong. The loop on the P too round. Ramirez pointed to another crate. These were used to apply for small business grants under Harper Vasquez Creative Partners, a DBA she filed without your knowledge. She pitched clients, secured lines of credit, even listed you as co-founder on some applications. My hands shook as I flipped through pages. One grant proposal included excerpts from projects I'd done solo in 2017, reworded slightly, credited to her team. In the farthest corner, under a gray moving blanket, sat a small metal lockbox. Ramirez handed me bolt cutters from his kit. Inside, a USB drive labeled simply E Backup, and a single printed photo. Elena and Ethan on a balcony at Cannon Beach. Sunset painting their faces gold. She wore the white sundress I'd bought her for our 4th anniversary. He had his arm around her waist. Timestamp in the bottom corner. April 12th, 2021, our 5th wedding anniversary weekend. She'd told me she was driving to Eugene because her mother had pneumonia and needed help. I'd offered to come. She'd said no. It would be too stressful. I'd spent that weekend alone in the condo, ordering takeout and watching old movies, feeling guilty for being relieved she was gone for a few days. I sat on the cold concrete floor, photo trembling in my hands. Ramirez crouched beside me. We pulled chat logs from the drive. Messages go back 8 years, sporadic at first, then regular after you married. The most recent, from 2 weeks ago. He's starting to ask questions about the accounts. Once the final wire clears, we disappear. And beach keys still good. I stared at the photo until the edges blurred. She celebrated our anniversary by recommitting to him. Ramirez nodded once. Looks that way. We sat in silence for a long minute. Then he stood. We'll need that photo and drive for evidence. But you can keep copies. I nodded numbly. As I left the unit, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like distant insects. Outside, the airport traffic roared past. I got in my car and drove, not home, but to the coast. I parked near Haystack Rock as the sun set, watching waves crash against stone. For hours I sat on the hood, photo beside me, letting the salt air scour the last illusions away. Emotional erosion, constant comparisons, growing secrecy, emotional withdrawal. Parallel life construction, ongoing affair maintained through work trips, simultaneous financial exploitation via small, calculated siphons. Irreversible point of no return. Discovery of the anniversary photo and recent messages proved not a momentary relapse, but a sustained, deliberate dual existence. Reconciliation became structurally impossible once premeditation and celebration of betrayal replaced any possibility of remorse or isolated mistake. I texted her once, 3 days after the storage unit visit. Public place. No lawyers. Tomorrow, 11 a.m. Hawthorne Coffee Collective. Bring nothing but truth. She arrived 20 minutes early. I watched through the window as she parked, smoothed her hair, adjusted the soft gray sweater I'd bought her our first Christmas together. She looked like the woman I fell in love with, poised, hopeful, a little nervous. She spotted me inside, offered a small, tentative smile. I didn't return it. I'd chosen a corner table near the back, away from the morning rush. A manila folder sat in front of me, printouts of the storage unit photo, key messages from the USB, forged signature comparisons, bank flags, grant applications. Saturday, you look tired, she said softly. I am. She reached for my hand. I moved it away. I opened the folder, slid the Cannon Beach photo across first. Her eyes widened, then filled. Lucas, why that weekend? I asked. She stared at the image. I told myself it was closure. One last time to be sure. Closure doesn't involve booking the same Airbnb you and I stayed in the year before. It doesn't involve smiling like that on our anniversary. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I was confused. Work was falling apart. The big client pulled out. My team was imploding. Ethan, he understood the pressure. He always did. I tapped the stack of forged documents. And these? My contracts, my tax records, my identity, repurposed for your agency. How does that fit into confusion? She swallowed. I panicked. I thought if I could build something big, prove I wasn't failing, then maybe I could leave him behind for real. You weren't leaving him behind, I said. You were planning to leave me. Silence stretched. The barista called an order for Elena, oat milk latte. She didn't move to get it. Why the dinner? I asked finally. Why say I'd never be half the man he was? She looked down at her hands. Because you're safe, reliable. You never push, never demand. Ethan was fire, chaos, passion. I told myself I could keep both. You as the foundation, him in the background for when I needed to feel alive. I leaned forward. And when the foundation started asking questions, I got scared. I accelerated everything. The transfers, the excuses. I thought if I could get enough together, I could start over without hurting you too much. You thought stealing from me was painless? She flinched. I told myself it was marital money, that you'd forgive me if I cried hard enough. I stood up slowly. You were right about one thing. I used to forgive anything if you cried hard enough. I left the folder on the table. Keep it. You'll need it for your lawyer. She grabbed my sleeve. Lucas, wait. I can fix this. I'll return everything. I'll write a full confession. Just don't press charges. Please. I looked at her hand on my arm, the same hand that had once reached for mine in the dark. You don't get to decide what's fixable anymore. I walked out into the spring sunlight. She didn't follow. The divorce finalized July 18th, 2026. No fault on paper, but the financial fraud charges were very fault-based. Elena pleaded to lesser counts, identity theft in the second degree, forgery, wire fraud, but the plea deal still meant probation, restitution, and permanent damage to her professional license. Her agency lost 3 major clients within 48 hours of the story leaking on industry forums. She moved into a 1-bedroom near Beaverton. Last I heard, she was working freelance gigs under a new name. Ethan ghosted the moment subpoenas landed, blocked her number, deleted shared drives, went radio silent. Apparently, fire and passion don't survive legal discovery. I sold the Pearl District condo in early June. The market was hot. I walked away with enough to buy a small cedar-sided cabin near Depot Bay on the Central Coast. No HOA, no neighbors close enough to hear arguments. Just the Pacific, wind-bent pines, and the constant low roar of surf. Mornings I surf before dawn. The water is cold, 52 degrees even in summer, but the shock clears my head like nothing else. I paddle out, sit on the board, watch the horizon lighten. No phone, no notifications, just salt and rhythm. I met Clara in August at the Nye Beach Art Walk. She restores vintage cameras, Leicas, Hasselblads, old Polaroids. She had a table of black and white prints, foggy coastlines, empty piers, the kind of quiet that feels intentional. We talked about light and composition, not pasts or betrayals. She laughed at my terrible joke about f-stops and never once asked why I lived alone in a cabin that smelled faintly of cedar and sea. We don't keep score. We don't compare. We just show up, her with coffee, me with breakfast burritos from the truck near the jetty. Some nights we sit on the deck, watch stars punch through the marine layer, and say nothing at all. It's the most peaceful silence I've ever known. The scars are still there. Trust doesn't regrow overnight. It's more like coral, slow, tentative, building on what's left. I still wake, sometimes reaching for a space that's empty. I still flinch at certain notifications. But the flinch is smaller now. The reach is gentler. I used to think love meant enduring anything, staying, fixing, forgiving until the other person chose you back. Now I understand love means choosing someone who doesn't make you audition against ghosts, who doesn't treat your worth as a variable to be measured and found wanting. Clara doesn't need me to be anyone but who I am on any given day. And for the first time in years, that feels like enough. Betrayal festers longest when endurance is mistaken for devotion. My suppressed rage and accumulated grief, emotions, eventually powered precise, irreversible actions, pressing charges, exposing documents, walking away without negotiation, which restored sovereignty over my own narrative. Elena's terror of ordinary life and fear of failure drove methodical exploitation, yet her pride and need for control blocked any genuine repair attempt. Universal insight. When your partner uses you as a benchmark against an idealized ghost, the deepest wound isn't the comparison itself. It's the years spent trying to prove your worth instead of simply claiming it. Clarity arrives quietly. It doesn't shout. It simply stands, steady and unborrowed, finally yours alone. Thanks for staying through the full story. If you've ever realized you were cast as the reliable backdrop while someone else held the spotlight, drop your experience below. Subscribe for more raw confessions. Stay honest. Stay free.